As an RN, parenting coach, mom, Grammy, and poet, what I help parents and caregivers who find themselves at their wits' end. And what I help them do is understand what's happening with their child and teach them tools and strategies to help them learn to respond rather than react to their kids' behavior. I'd say among all the parents I've worked with over the past 10 plus years in both individually and groups, that the refrain of help, my child won't listen is pretty consistent and universally shared as a frustration of parenting. So I want to tell you, you're not alone. And I know it can feel like you are. You'll hear that later in my story, how isolated I felt. But you're not alone in your challenges and in the struggles you have with your parenting. And if trying harder were the solution, you wouldn't be here today, because I truly believe you could not be trying harder. I know you're all really committed, good parents, because you're all here wanting to be better. And I know that you're the hardest person on yourself if you're anything like me and like I was. I'm also guessing you're doing your best to follow things you've read in books, heard from other parents, advice of this and that, and they're not necessarily working with your child. And maybe they're making things worse. And one client said to me recently, I don't want to just keep upping the ante, but I don't know what else to do. And she was coming out of the frustration of her kid not listening. So it was a very apropos comment. So in today's workshop, I'm going to talk about the three of the top reasons your child won't listen. And let me just go over a little overview for the rest of the class. I'm going to tell you briefly my story, what a parent-centric approach is. This is an approach, a model that I have created. I'm going to go over each of the three reasons and delve into them, and also teach you some practical strategies around that. All right, so I'm going to be going back and forth between sharing and my face. And right now, this is just the overview. So like what, I don't want you sitting there thinking, what are the three things the whole time? This is the quick note. 3 reasons you don't have their attention, they're dealing with a transition, and emotional age rules. And I'm going to be going in depth for each one of these, offer concrete actionable strategies. So that is what we're going to be talking about later. The next thing, I want you to hear this. You get it right more often than you realize. You really do. But here's the thing. Many traditional approaches rely on rewards and consequences to change behavior. And when that's what's relied on, it's missing. Those approaches are missing a key piece of the parenting puzzle, which is a core understanding that behavior is communication. So I'm going to pop off the share for a minute and talk about this for a minute or two. All right, so they're missing. So the key piece is that behavior is communication. Let me give that a minute to sink in, because that's radical. And it's your child's first language. Like when they were infants, they spoke behavior and you understood them because they're babies. They cried, they had a certain cry, they scrunched their knees up and you thought their tummy hurt. Like their behavior was their language. The thing is, as children begin to learn words, and we want them to learn words and use words to express their feelings, it takes a long time for that journey. And so their behavior continues to be a language of communication. that can help you know what they're saying and be able to get them what they need. Without that understanding that behaviors communication, it's like trying to navigate your parenting journey with road signs in a foreign language. You try to guess what they mean, you think they make sense, and then you find yourself down another dead-end road. Today, what I hope to do is translate the road signs of your kids' behavior and make sense of what's happening with them when they won't listen. You'll also learn effective strategies to help you respond rather than react. I know several parents wrote in ahead of time and what do I do? How do I keep from being triggered? How do I respond when my child won't listen? And I just really acknowledge you all for that being in your mind, how important that is. But first, before we get into all that, let me share for a minute where I'm coming from. Take a minute. I have a special place in my heart for parents like you, because I was that struggling parent. I was actually a single parent with 3 kids. And my now 33-year-old is the one that I learned a lot of I learned a lot from and had a lot of the kind of struggles that I talk about. And he's doing really well. He's a teacher, a special educator for deaf kids in high school. And we have a great relationship that would absolutely never have been possible without the 180-degree turnaround we made about 12 years ago when he was 19. Let me back up a bit, because I had struggled for years with this kid. I didn't know at the time that he was more stress sensitive, but I didn't know much at the time. I just knew what I read and heard and saw. So I struggled for years since he was in about third grade. Opposition, defiance, not listening. And the voices around me said, ramp up the consequences, take away more things, just try this, that worked for them. And I felt really isolated and blamed myself for not being consistent enough. I vowed every day to be more patient, and still we continued to struggle. And it was at times very heartbreaking. So somewhere inside I knew that these approaches weren't the right thing for my child, but I couldn't make sense of what was happening. And that's because I was missing the same piece of the parenting puzzle. I didn't understand what was behind my child's behavior, what was driving it. So I finally connected to the right support to help us. And I thought because my kid was 19, it was too late. But then I learned this amazing piece of brain science, and I'm a big brain science geek. There's a lot of science in my work. I learned that executive function doesn't fully finish developing until age 25. And I knew that I still had time to make a change. And so I went into this process of repairing my relationship and learned to see them through the eyes of understanding what was driving their behavior. And I became my child's ally rather than their adversary. In essence, I got my child back. So I'm going to share a picture and talk more about my approach and my philosophy. So here we are last summer, me and my kiddo. Anyways, we have a great relationship. So I take a parent-centric approach. What that means is that I believe the power lies in the hands of the parents to be the change agent. Imagine this, your child is like a boat. My mouse is right in the middle there, but there's your child up on the boat, tossed on the waves. And it can be so tempting to jump in the boat when the waves get rough and the storm is raging and you want to help. But rather than helping, you end up getting tossed about on the waves too. Now, in a practical sense, what that looks like is getting hooked into the power struggle, right? Getting triggered and hooked in again to a power struggle. It looks like walking on eggshells around your child. This is all not, this all does not lead to a feeling of security or safety for your child. So the parent-centric approach invites you to be the anchor. And I love this little, it's a GIF actually, but has a little heart anchor. Invites you to be the anchor, to tether your child, to be grounded yourself, to help them feel safe and help them build resilience. I have 7 guiding principles that inform this approach, and they're rooted at the intersection of brain science, attachment theory, intergenerational family dynamics, and parents' inner wisdom. And here they are. Connection matters more than perfection. Behavior is an SOS, not an attack. The better you do, the better your child does. Families are dynamic systems where all members affect each other. Your child wants to please you. Small changes lead to big results, and what you focus on increases. So let's take a closer look. Let me just take a minute to breathe that in. Let that soak in a minute. All right, let's take a closer look at what it means to respond rather than react, and how this shows up in the difference of approach or paradigm. All right, so version 1, you've got this, you've got the parent coming over, either time to do your homework, okay, or you need to do your homework now, or could you do your homework? This drill, it starts kind of in a nice place, and then it kind of quickly devolves through a process that goes into from first you ask or tell, then you start reasoning, bargaining, pleading. Then you start threatening with consequences or rewards, and it melts down to the point of often yelling. And you don't get a really good result, and you're not getting a really good connection here. And this is seeing that the behavior, someone who did this is in Europe, so you got a European spelling of behavior here. The behavior is a problem. And it's an approach that stays on the surface to try to control the behavior. A parent-centric approach flips, and it expects the child, this child-centric part of it is it kind of puts the weight of resilience on the child, rather than building the skills for resilience, which we of course want our children to have in the long term. So the parent-centric approach goes from the bottom, from the connection, to build healthy attachment, to have deep connection. And rather than going down that spiral, you go at it's the same thing. I'm in the middle of the game, or no, I'm not getting off, any kind of combination of things when you ask your kid to do something that you all are familiar with. And there might be like, it's time, a little assertion, it's time to get off. And then with this approach, given that a parent has caught themselves in this place of like, oh, this is that time, connection is what's needed, it's a transition, he's getting off the computer. So this parent makes a connection with the child to understand what's happening and how a sudden abrupt ending is not easy and is triggering. Let's find a good stopping point. We've got some connection. And there might be more curiosity. When does the next stopping point come? Tell me what you're doing. A little more connection, curiosity, something that can not trigger the defense mechanism, the deer in the headlights, at the sudden like time to get off. Even if the kid knew they had to get off in 10 minutes, they are not keeping track of any 10 minutes while they're playing their game. So we don't want them to be deer in the headlights. So those are two different ways. That's the child-centric, or, you know, trying to control behavior from the top, stays on the surface. And you notice what happens too. Both of these parents love their child. But as this first power struggle and that downward spiral happens, the love kind of turns, the love doesn't change, but the parent gets caught up in fear or anxiety or its defensiveness, so that it cuts off the ability to be in real connection at that moment. In this case, the love can keep being the guiding factor instead of fear or defensiveness. So this shot, behavior is communication. I want you to take a good look at this. And I think I have to get off the share to be able to see the chat. But take a look at that and think about what do you think that boy is feeling? And what I'd like you to do is in the chat, anybody just chat in, what is that boy feeling? And chat right into that. There we go. Vulnerable, scared, sad, fearful, isolated by his emotions, alone, embarrassed, scared, frustrated, fear, sadness, insecure, full of shame, and afraid he might get in trouble. Oh my God, I'm getting chills. So you really can see what's happening with him. Now, here's the thing. Some children show this in the way they get dysregulated or anxious or overwhelmed. But many children show behaviors that don't look like this at all. They look aggressive, they're hitting, they're biting, they're throwing, they're yelling, they're being super defiant and saying bad words. But inside that child is also this child. That's the magic of understanding that behavior is communication. Because when you understand that this child's hiding scared inside that child who's acting out, and you remember to see that because you're at this class and you're thinking of the principal behavior is an SOS, not an attack, you will be able to connect to what the child needs. And what that child needs is connection. That child needs regulation. That child needs to know they're safe with some big feeling they're having where they're not okay. So that's a quick overview of what's going on under the surface, and that will come in more as we talk about your questions and stuff. But that was awesome, your chats. So the next thing is we have a group participation thing at your choice. We're going to pause and take 3 breaths. This is an opportunity to learn one of my top strategies. It's a piece of my stop, drop, and breathe strategy. And the piece it is the breathe part. So there's tons of ways to breathe, and you might have ways that work really well for you, so you don't have to change them. But I find this is an effective way to help bring you into a state of regulation, because the brain is connected to the breath, and breathing can calm your trigger, can calm your dysregulation and your stress and overwhelm. So I call this balloon belly breathing. So the first thing, I'll talk you through it, we'll do it together. I may have to back up and stand up a little so you can see me. Okay. Imagine a balloon is in your belly and put your hand on your belly below your belly button. Imagine the balloon's in your belly with the nozzle up, and imagine what color your balloon is today. Sometimes it's different colors. Do that if it feels fun. And the first thing I want you to do is blow air out like you're blowing out all the candles on your great grandma's birthday cake. And now taking a breath in through your nose, fill the balloon with air. As it fills, you may feel your belly pushing into your hand. Now open your mouth, exhale. Exhale all the air out and imagine the balloon deflating. Feel your hand sinking and then deflate a little more. Breathe in again through your nose. Feel the balloon, see if it's stretched a little more. Exhale through your mouth. Deflate, 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 and deflate even more. Third time, inhale through the nose. Balloon's expanding. A little longer, a little deeper. Exhale through your mouth. Balloon is deflating. Feel the shoulders dropping down, melting down. Feel your feet sinking in the floor. If you're sitting on a chair, feel your sit bones sinking. And deflate, deflate, deflate. And then breathe normally. And that's breathe. I've stopped, drop, and breathe. Now just chat quickly in how you feel after doing those 3 breaths. Anything's welcome. Notice, what do you notice? Centered. Shoulders more relaxed. More relaxed. Shoulders dropped. Great. So keep chatting in. I want to hear. Less tense. Awesome. When you are more regulated, so this more calm, less tense, however much percent of more calm you are, imagine you're that much more available to connect to your child. Because when you're tense, defensive, that's a lot of 80% of communication is nonverbal. Your child feels that and doesn't feel that you're available. So that's great. All right, so what is next? Aha. This is the next share. All right, just breathe this in for a second. You were never meant to do this parenting thing alone. We have been conditioned, I'd say through a lot of history, certainly culturally, to think that we should be able to do it all, that we should know what to do, be able to do it, and God forbid we don't. We've been conditioned that everyone else must have it figured out, so we can't ask for help, and we have to do it on our own. And really, we're not biologically wired for that. We are biologically wired for connection. And our brains, we come into this world hardwired for connection to be the way we survive. And the software gets installed with whatever the connection we meet is. So that's another talk. But connection, and so we are wired for community and for support. And we are not wired for isolation and feeling like we're the only one struggling. So I just want you to know that. And as we continue into the 3 things and understanding better what's happening, just keep that in mind. So let me just tell you 3 quick stories. Number 1, the story of Jack, a dad, at breakfast with his kids. His kids are 5 and 3, and the 5-year-old goes to school. Maybe she's 6, I don't remember exactly. So they're sitting at breakfast. They're eating, they're procrastinating. I'll focus on her. She's the one that's going to go to school. She's watching screen to kind of get her to eat. And Dad says, it's time to finish up now and go get ready, get your shoes on. She responds, not at all. And now he's like, I said it's time to get ready. So now he's starting that process, that downwards process. And he's starting to escalate. And he's like, I want you to listen to me the first time. I told you already, it's time to get ready. And it escalates and it turns into yelling. The second story, and I'm going to have resolutions for these stories too. Susan, story of Susan. It's bedtime every night after dinner. And both of these are recent client stories, are like Groundhog Day. They happened, the same power struggle every day. Bedtime, not bedtime yet, bedtime transition. After dinner, kids are playing. I have a lot of parents with kids that are like 5 and 3. They're like, or 6 and 4. And they're playing and they're playing nicely. Mom's like, then this timer goes off, this bell rings that the kids can hear. And mom's like, time to clean up and start to get ready for bed. And the kids start running around. They start being silly. Mom starts the nagging half hour, and it escalates, and pretty soon everyone's unhappy. And by the time the kids actually get in the bathroom to start getting ready, there's a giant power struggle over toothbrushing. So that's story number 2. Number 3 is the story of Mary, her 7-year-old. Time to get ready for school. And she's up in her room and it's like, get dressed. And then it's like, get dressed. So repeating yourself 5 times, 10 times, 20 times. And your children aren't listening, quote unquote. So she goes up and she's like, get your clothes on. And the kid and the little girl is, no, you help me. I need you to help me. And mom's like, you know how to get dressed? Your clothes are right there. No, help me. And so finally exasperated, mom helps her because it's going to be the most expedient. And they go downstairs. And so all 3 stories, everyone's left in a kind of state of distress. And for parents, I know for myself, that's hard to get out of our mind. We tend to second guess ourselves, beat ourselves up, all the things like, I wish I'd been more patient, da, 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 you know the drill. So here's the 3 things that we're going to focus on as our strategies. Share screen. Oh yeah, first, well, anyways, let's do this. Okay, first, let's review. Here's the 3 reasons you don't have their attention. They're dealing with a transition and emotional age rules. Let's look at one thing at a time. Number 1, you don't have their attention. You call across the room, you call down from the landing. Your child's engaged. They're involved in what they're doing. They're kind of ignoring you, but kind of like it looks a lot more like ignoring than they're just in their own place. And you haven't gotten their attention. And so which story, oh, I can't do this chat. Okay, I'll have to go back and forth because I just really want to see what you're going to say. Which of the stories I said resonates with get their attention first? Which one would you say would be a good strategy to use in that of the 3 stories I said? It was Jack over breakfast, Susan bedtime after dinner, and Mary getting dressed. Yes, Jack, absolutely. And yes, it applies to others, but that was the more obvious one. So there you have this expectation, and I think he's not alone in that expectation. We want to have the authority in and be the parent. We want our kids to listen to us when we tell them something. When I tell you, I want you to listen to me the first time. I think the confusion and the problem is that it isn't necessarily that they're not listening. It's that you don't have their attention. Okay, this isn't always true, but this is often true and something to think about applying in your situations. What I would recommend to Jack and to anyone, and I love the way this picture does, the way this screenshot conveys that, is get down to eye level. And I wouldn't say, look at me. I would say, get down to your child's level. Let me see those big blue eyes. Let me see those beautiful brown eyes. So you call your child to you to create this link, this connection link where they're attuned. We're talking about attunement, actually. You're attuning to your child, and then you tell them the thing you want them to listen to. That's step one for getting their attention and then getting them to listen. Of course, this is an overview, but it's really a good first step, because those 5 times calling from the landing, even if your kid's a little older, they're pretty skilled at saying, okay, okay. That doesn't mean they're listening, and it doesn't mean they mean okay. It just means, I know if I say this, mom will leave me alone. It might mean kind of that. You really have to go to your child and get their attention. I had to do that with my grandson because he gets very engrossed in his TV shows. He's 5. I can't call your lunch is on the table. It's like I could say that and raise my voice louder and louder. I need to go and pause the TV, get his attention. Let me see those big blue eyes. Your lunch is on the table. Come and eat, and he'll come eat. Number 2, they're dealing with a transition. All right, okay, so take a look at the picture. I'm going to come right back to it, but I want to see whose story was the transition. There was more than one, which was more emphasis on the transition. You can even just say what it was about if you can't remember the names. It doesn't matter. And yes, Susan. Yes, the whole bedtime, the whole nagging time. And the kids in that situation were pretty unhappy. And of course, so was mom. And in that case, what we changed was the bell that rang, that was kind of like the alarm, it's time to get ready for bed. And what was conditioned from repetition to those kids was that bell means now we're all going to end up crying and unhappy, and mom's going to yell. That's what the bell meant. That was the conditioning of that bell. So first thing I said was eliminate the bell, do your own alarm so you know when it's time. And what I did was basically taught her get on the train. So let me switch to the screen share again, and I'm going to talk about what's get on the train. It's a great strategy I learned years ago. So you see how the station is here? Like, you know, the station's there. The station is bedtime. The station is time, school bus. The station is dinner, whatever it is. But your child on the train is engaged in what they're doing. If they're having playtime and it's time to stop playtime or screen time or anything, it doesn't matter, any transition. And transitions can be very small. For some kids that are stress sensitive, getting out of bed can be a transition. So by the time they get out of bed and get to breakfast and to the school bus, let's say, they've had like 5 or 7 transitions. Get out of bed, get dressed, go down to a different room, eat breakfast, stop breakfast. Like, every single one is a little transition for a kid that's very stress sensitive. And there could be a lot of resistance and power struggles around those kind of transitions. Other transitions are the ones in my story, getting off to school, getting ready for bed, getting off the screen, like the other picture. So your child, if they're dealing with a transition, here's the question to ask yourself. It's probably almost always going to be true if it's a repeating power struggle. Ask yourself, is my child having a transition? I mean, like any transition from one thing to another could be perceived at different times of day, depending where your kid's at or what's going on in their life, and could be more anxiety provoking or overwhelm provoking and cause more acting out. So get on the train. Your child's on the train. Like what I did with Sue was I said, you set the alarm for yourself, then you go join the kids. Go join them in their playtime. Hey, what are you playing? Show me what you're doing. Oh, what'd you just build? Get engaged with the kids. Figure it's going to be 5 or 10 minutes. So you're joining them. You're having special time with them. And you're helping regulate them because you're coming in from a calm place. And you're going to have some fun with them too. Then you tell them it's 5 minutes till we have to go brush teeth. I'll just use that. And at that point, you set a shared timer. They're going to have a sense, 5 minutes. Then you keep playing. The timer goes off. Time to clean up. You do the cleanup, and it pulls into the station, and you get off with them. You assist them off the train and into the bathroom to brush their teeth. In this case, a week later, when I talked to her, she said the change was dramatic, that there was no more struggle over toothbrushing. The kids were really happy, and it turned into a time when they're all happy and having a good playtime together. So that was a hugely powerful example of get on the train. The number 3 is emotional age rules. Again, this could be a whole webinar, but this whole concept of emotional age is one of the things I've heard from parents is the most valuable thing they've taken from other classes I've done. What this means is your child has more than one age. They have an emotional age, a chronological age, and a cognitive intellectual age. And many times those 3 don't line up. It can be really confusing to have a very articulate child who's not able to tell you what's going on and what they're feeling when they're having an unexpected meltdown or something. It can also be confusing and also a little disconcerting when your 7-year-old starts crawling around on the floor like a baby and wants to talk in baby talk, or wants you to carry them or help them get dressed, as in Mary's case. This particular child has a history of a lot of trauma and tends to regress at times. And so in this case, she was acting more like, I want to make sure for time, so I'm just going to fill this in, but you think in your own head, how old do you think that behavior, whining, help me get dressed, da da da. And I can look at it later when I see the chat, but you can put it in there. I see that as around 3-ish, 2, 3. The magic of emotional age is that you have to meet your child where they are. And when you meet them at emotional age, you will get through to them because that's the part of their brain that's online. Their executive function is compromised at that moment. So no matter how articulate they can be and how much they know what they're supposed to do, in a given moment, if they're dysregulated, they may be a different emotional age. And that's your connection point. The power of that, because I know parents have big concern too, because it's counterintuitive. Well, I don't want to make them more dependent. I don't want to give in. In this paradigm, what you're doing is actually building resilience, because you have a child, they wouldn't be regressed and they wouldn't be dysregulated if something wasn't driving their behavior underneath, some amount of stress, anxiety, overwhelm. Their behavior's communicating that that's what's going on inside, which means they're having feelings that are too big for them to know what to do with. By meeting them at their emotional age, it allows them to feel safe and connected, and that builds their capacity for resilience to be able to tolerate being okay with big feelings. This builds resilience and emotional and social well-being, rather than the opposite of trying to force them to independence when they're feeling not okay. It forces them into more of coping skills that we carry for life and have to go to therapy about. So we really want them to build resilience, not just coping skills. Of course, we all build those at some point, but we want to emphasize resilience. Connect with the emotional age. So I'm going to give you a couple examples from my clients. One of them is this. So with Mary, I guess I never finished Mary's story. Connecting with the emotional age would be recognizing that her 7-year-old is whining and wanting to help get dressed, and her just being able to pause a minute and go, oh, wow, wait, what age kid would be doing that? We can't click on my presentation. What does that mean?
That was earlier, we couldn't click, but now it's all solved because you put the
great. If you have a specific concern, like you can't access the thing, please just put it in the chat box and I will look at it later and get in touch with you, okay? Your name will be on make sure your name's on it. As a matter of fact, yeah, you don't have to put it in the, you can do a private message to me if you want in the chat. When you click on everyone, you can go to me. I think, where am I? Oh dear, just chat it in. And make sure it says your name. Please get in touch. I couldn't access or something. Okay, that's the best way to do it right now. And I save the chat and everything. So that's an example where mom would look and go, wow, they're acting like they're 3. So instead of sort of doubling down, what I call this is hitting the gas when you see a deer in the headlights, you hit the brakes. You recognize this seems younger. How would I help a child who's 3 or 2? And instead of exasperatedly getting them dressed, you're like, oh, sweetie, sure, come here, let me help you get your shirt on. Like, so it's counterintuitive and it might feel uncomfortable. I completely concede all that. But it's effective and leads to cooperation. Another example I have is a parent of a 5-year-old who was kind of had problems going to bed, and the kid wanted to be carried to the bathroom for her last pee of the night, and mom was like, just go and pee, it's fine, the lights are on, I'm here, but this is a sign of a kid who's exhibiting in the stress of bedtime some emotionally younger behavior. Carry me, again, I don't know, two-ish, can be infant. In that picture I showed you about behavior is communication. That child looked to be about 5 or 7, but that crying child looked to be almost a baby in their emotional age. So mom decided, all right, I'm gonna try this emotional age thing, even though it feels weird. And she carried her daughter to the toilet and sat her on the toilet. And she said, my daughter had the biggest smile ever. And she felt so good about it. And so this is a different approach, but what we're building is the resilience. The child suddenly was like, oh, I'm okay. And she didn't even have to carry her very long. I don't know, a few times. Then she went by herself, because they're not really 2, they're 5 or 7, but they needed something met that was missing inside, and that was met through emotional age. So that's just a couple of examples. Look at your child, ask yourself, how old do they seem? And then ask yourself, what would you do for a child that age? You can find me at parentingbeyondwords.com or at Facebook at Parenting Beyond Words. And it's just been a real pleasure to be with you today.